Hi, thanks so much for joining us. Our professional development today is discussing student academic success, and especially in the context of our adult degree completion students, so our LEADS and Bachelor's of Applied Science students. I am Anna Kristiniak. I'm an advisor in the Center for Adult and Continuing Studies. I'm joined by Liz Chase, who is a senior success coach over in the Student Academic Success Center, or SASE for short.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much, Anna, for the invite to chat a little bit about what we do over in SASE. So again, my name is Liz Chase. I'm a senior student success coach. I've been here for about 6 years, and I'm really excited to chat a little bit about our services and the resources that we have available to students.
Perfect. So we've had a couple of submitted questions, and we've had a couple of our advisors add in some of those common queries that we get, especially from students that are a little bit newer to an adult degree completion program, and the format of some of the classes. So Liz has some great tips for us today on how to be successful specifically in these programs and with these courses. So I guess to get us started, what sort of support is available for our online degree completion students?
So I would say a majority of the resources and services available through SASE, available to those who are in person, are also available to those who are doing online programs, right? So meeting with a success coach is absolutely available to students. And really what we do here at Grand Valley is we help students navigate academics, right? So whether it be talking through time management strategies and getting organized and getting a good system in place for yourself, or maybe it's setting some real specific goals for the semester and thinking through how to make progress towards those goals, or maybe it's study strategies, right? Maybe it's figuring out how you can best prepare for those big exams or tests. We also talk about motivation, right? How do we keep that motivation throughout the semester and maybe decrease some of those procrastination or stall tactics that we all have? So another piece too is we refer students all the time to lots of other campus resources. So if it's something that we can't particularly answer, we're going to connect you to a good resource or a good office that can help you in any type of situation. So that's a little bit about success coaching and why you might chat with us. So that's available to you. We're available in person or virtually via Zoom. Another resource that we provide that would be available to you is our sort of self-service website. And this covers really all of those topics that I just mentioned and more. And I think I'm going to share my screen now, if that's okay, just to show you. That's a little bit easier. So here is our Student Academic Success Center website. And if you hit Success Coaching, this is actually where you could make an appointment with a success coach. So that's schedule an appointment. And this page is going to explain a little bit more, kind of like what I did of what that's going to look like, what kind of conversations we could have. But this academic resources page, and Anna, tell me if you can see this. I'm hoping I'm not
Yes,
losing.
perfect.
Okay, so this is sort of that self-service page that I was just talking about. So it covers lots of different topics. And if you go into a particular page, you're going to find tips, strategies. You're going to find worksheets that we typically use with students when talking through time management. You'll see some videos that you can watch, very quick little snippets, as well as some useful apps too. And these are all free apps for your phone. So this, like I said, is sort of one of those self-service pages. So if for whatever reason you can't meet with a coach, but you want to look through some of this sort of on your own time at your own pace, this is also available to you and has a lot of good, like I said, tips and tricks. And then the last web page that I will show you is we also have some self-paced workshops or modules that cover, again, some of these same topics. Now, these are going to go a little bit more in depth, and there will be videos that are narrated, again, talking through some of these different strategies and tips that we have on these different topics. So again, that's something that you can do sort of on your own time. And it does, like I said, get a little bit more in depth on some of these various topics. So those would be the main resources that I would say through our office that are available to you all.
Yeah, that's great. And it's really holistic. So, you know, while you might find tutoring or other support for a specific class, what you're really learning in SASE is developing skills that help you be a student, but then also beyond, right? I mean, these are all things that we bring into the professional workplace and, you know, into our lives in other places. And I just remind students too that, you know, your advisor is an important part of your team. You know, if you're looking for resources, we can help you there. We can also help you select classes and adjust your academic plan so that you feel really confident about the classes that you're taking and you feel like you will be able to, you know, maximize work-life balance as much as you can as an adult college student. Perfect. Okay. So Liz, how do I prepare for an online accelerated degree completion program if I've been out of school for a long time, or maybe if I'm transitioning from a traditional in-seat program that has 15-week classes?
This is a great question. And I think the first piece of this is understanding that with any major transition, it's gonna entail change. And that change is going to take time. And so, you know, giving yourself grace through that transition and understanding that it is a process. I think that's sort of like the biggest first initial thing is just recognizing that and sort of going into it with some of those expectations around, all right, we've got to give this some time. I think the other key thing would be creating that system or routine, right? Getting yourself organized, getting something in place right away to make sure that you're not missing any assignments, that you're allowing enough time to complete work. And what that's also going to help with is decreasing some of that stress and anxiety that comes around sort of this new environment, trying to understand expectations, right? So again, initially, you know, recognizing that this is a big transition, getting that routine set. And really that can be done by using any number of tools, right? So you could use a Google Calendar, you could use an actual like tangible planner, which we have some of those free. If you'd ever want to stop by our office, we could give you one. You could use whiteboards, you could use Google spreadsheets. I know a lot of students who use something in Google spreadsheets called assignment tracker. That seems to be really helpful. Some students just simply use the notes app in their phone. So again, there are a number of tools that you can use. I'm never going to say that there's only one tool. It's really based on personal preference and what you're the most likely to use and look at, right? So figuring out whatever that tool is right away in the semester is key, and then starting to build that routine. And it's important to not only include in that tool, you know, your class schedule, but also include that homework and study schedule, right? So once you start to map everything out, you start to see some natural gaps in your schedule and put in exactly when you are going to work on what, right? So Mondays from 6 to 7, I'm working on my math class, right? The more specific you can be, the easier it's going to be to get yourself to do it, right? Because you know exactly what you have to do when you have to do it. And again, that eliminates some of that stress. So getting a system and routine in place, sorry, I'm checking my notes just to make sure I'm not leaving anything out. Staying in communication with your professors too, right? That's really, really key. And that's a good habit to just get into, especially if there's any content that needs clarifying or if there's any expectations around assignments that needs clarifying. The minute that things are unclear, that's when you need to email your professor or visit their office hours and have that conversation. We want to be really proactive when it comes to things like this and not wait until we're really, really struggling, right? So staying in communication, and then again, just giving yourself time and grace because this is a major transition. So, and that entails lots of change, instilling new habits, maybe even stopping some old habits, which is tough.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you're hitting on that there can be a real learning curve for these asynchronous classes and, you know, accelerated ones too. I'll just remind students that although everyone's got different strengths and weaknesses and maybe prefer some classes over others, a good rule of thumb is to think about 15 hours of work per week for every 3 credit asynchronous accelerated class that you're taking. Again, just as a rule of thumb, again, you can create that structure that, you're talking about, Liz. And then if things are going well, find ways to adjust your schedule and taper back. But right, it's much easier to set the structure in the beginning and then loosen it up if we need to.
Yeah, another thing that I didn't mention too that I always suggest to students is right away in the beginning of the semester, in that tool that you've decided to use to organize yourself, input all of your homework due dates and all test exam dates for all of your classes. That way it's in one centralized location and you don't have to go scouting for where that is when you get busy.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes, professors can give you stuff different places, right? Like a syllabus or other things might be in Blackboard and those sorts of things. So yeah, sometimes that compiling is a little bit of your own responsibility. Perfect. So as we're kind of talking about, some of these classes and perhaps how to plan for them, what might you do if you have to take a class in a subject that maybe you don't enjoy that much or one that you've struggled with in the past?
Yeah, well, this is also a good question. And unfortunately, I think many students encounter at least one class that they either don't enjoy or maybe they find really challenging, right? So it's a good question to bring up because it most likely might happen to you, right? So I think one thing initially that I would say is if it's a class that maybe isn't as interesting, try to connect it to something personal. Same thing goes with it if it's a more challenging class, right? The more often you can connect it to something personal, the more likely you are to retain that information, right? Because it's going to mean more. Same thing goes with connecting material to prior knowledge, right? Especially if it's a class that maybe you've taken in the past. And so maybe you're retaking it or something like that. Whenever you can connect to prior knowledge, so what, if in the past you've learned that content before, that also will help you retain that information. Another tip that I give to students if they're in a challenging class or a class that they just kind of are like, this is not for me, when you sit down to do homework, oftentimes our inclination is to complete any homework that is easy, right? Or for the subjects that we really enjoy, which makes sense, right? Because it's quick, it's easy, it's enjoyable, we can check it off our list. And for some students that really works, right, during their homework session, because then they can start to gain some momentum and confidence, and that will help bring them back to another study session or another homework session. But sometimes when we do that and we do all the easy stuff or the stuff that we're really interested in, then we stop there and we start to push off the homework for those more challenging classes or maybe the classes that don't interest us the most. And then we continue to push it off, push it off, push it off. So if that's the case, if you find yourself in that scenario, I might suggest doing the hard stuff first, right? Or the stuff that we kind of don't want to do that first in the very beginning of your homework session when you're the most energized and the most focused, because oftentimes, especially with the challenging work, that's what it's going to entail, right? Is when you get it takes a lot of energy, right? So get that stuff out of the way too. And then that way it'll ensure that you aren't pushing it off, right? So whether that's maybe in the beginning of the week doing the challenging stuff first, or even just in the beginning of your homework session. So thinking about your energy cycles too is important, right? And when you're trying to complete which type of work. And then I think the last thing that I would mention is mindset, right? That can have a real impact on how successful we are in class. So if we haven't been successful in a class in the past, when we go into that class thinking the same thing, that can kind of be a detriment. So we want to make sure that we're going into the class with more of a growth mindset, believing that we can develop our abilities, we can improve and get better at that particular class with more effort and time. That will help you be successful, right? So those are just a couple things that come to mind.
Yeah, and I know we've got a diverse program, but we've got some future teachers, we have people who are parents, we have people who work with kids and students all day, and I'm like, it's the same thing. Like, think, what would you say if your kid, is taking a class and they're like, oh, why do I have to take this? Or your student, right? It's the same thing. We just got to talk to ourselves the same way sometimes, right? Like, sometimes we got to do stuff that puts us out of our comfort zone. another thing to just add in here too is that, I mean, this is something that would be totally acceptable and great to share with an academic advisor too. I mean, there are some classes that we offer in 15-week formats. You can talk about that if you think maybe giving yourself a little bit of extra time or even a dedicated semester to a course that feels a little bit intimidating might be an option. Not always, but again, some of the classes that we think students tend to do better when they have more time, we do offer in an online asynchronous 15-week format. And again, the other thing too is, I mentioned this previously, but we can move your plan around to accommodate your life. And so if you feel like there are, some semesters where you're super busy at work, or you have, a kid in travel sport, we can find ways to move classes around so that you feel like you've got the most, and we're maximizing the free time that you might have for those classes. I guess the last thing I think is your advisor could also help you find a class that is really fun, maybe for the second session. Like Liz said, do the hard stuff first. We can have a class that's less fun in the first session if that's when it's offered, and then follow it up with something that will really inspire you, keep your attention, a class you're excited about. So there's a light at the end of the tunnel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, I mean, these classes move faster than our 15-week or traditional classes that students might have been in. So what can you do if you feel like feedback from an instructor is not being returned to you in time to start working on the next week's work or the next assignment?
Yeah, I would always suggest reach out to your professor, right away. If you feel like this is sort of gone on too long and you really need that feedback in order to move forward with other assignments, I would email your professor, I would visit their office hours and ask for that feedback. And again, sort of going back to this proactive habits to get into, you may even consider at the beginning of each semester, just initially going in, meeting with your professor during office hours, either in person or virtually, and just asking the question right away, right? Saying, what does feedback look like in this course, and how often should I expect to receive it? That's just probably a good habit to get into, right? Initially introducing yourself so they know you, so that in the future, if you have questions, they'll be like, hey, I know Anna, she came to my office hours, great. But also just directly asking that question about feedback. It may be a useful thing to do right away.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're talking about being proactive and looking at that syllabus right away. I mean, I'll just add in too is that, sometimes your syllabus can give you some clues as to whether or not the feedback from one assignment will be, very necessary. We've got some classes that are like in units where you finish a unit and then you move on and you're doing something else. That might not have quite the same pressing need to incorporate feedback as a course that has scaffolded classes where you can see, okay, I'm completing the first part of an assignment, then I use what I did to do the next part. Or if there's a class where later you have to do a reflection or remix some of the work you've done. So sometimes the syllabus can even give you a little bit of a clue in terms of, how often feedback might be given or how much you'll need it. But of course, yeah, reaching out to your professor is great. Any FaceTime, right? Even if it's over email, goes a long way when a professor is at the end of the semester and grading or adding participation points. They remember your name for sure.
Yeah. Yep.
Wonderful. Okay. So our last question. What should I do if I've had a semester where I haven't met the goals that I've set for myself or the university requirements?
Yeah. I would say a couple things. One, I would say meet with a success coach, right? We can help you sort of create some maybe new goals and think through ways to make progress towards those goals. The other thing that I would say, and this would be probably a part of that conversation if you met with a success coach, is reflecting back on that last semester and thinking through, okay, so what were some things that I maybe could have done differently? Or what were some things that helped that I want to continue to do moving forward, right? A lot of times we chat with students about, right, if you want a different result, whether that's on a test or during a semester, you got to do something different, right? So it probably will entail some changing of habits, maybe instilling some new ones. But that's a conversation that we are more than happy to have. And like I said, we can sort of map out some goals and really think through what that looks like for you and ways in which you can make progress towards that goal. But again, even if you don't meet with us, just doing some of that self-reflection on your own time can be really helpful, and really like jotting down ideas of like, okay, this didn't quite work for me last semester. I'm going to do it in this way this semester, right? Or this was really helpful, so I'm going to keep implementing that. So it's not about what's happened in the past, right? Because we've all gotten thrown off track. We have all had things not go according to plan. That's just life. That's going to happen. But the thing that does matter is how we move forward, right? And what adjustments and changes we're making to ensure a different result.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know, maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I know sometimes it can be like very easy to sort of catastrophize a semester where maybe we didn't hit our goals. And so, right, getting support from a coach, reflecting, great. I mean, the other thing to do is just plan to have some, frank discussions too. I mean, an academic advisor can talk to you about strategies for when to maybe retake that course if it will help your GPA. Or ways that might impact your plan or your, future plans if you're shooting for grad school or things like that. But I agree. I mean, a line on your transcript never tells the whole story, especially for our adult students that have a lot of things on their plate, but we can always change things, get back on track, and have a better semester in the future, right?
Yeah, and I want to reiterate this asking for help, which I know is difficult for everybody, but it's so key during your experience here. I don't know, to be honest, a single college student who goes through this experience without getting help at some point, right? Like it's a part of the process. So seeking help, utilizing resources, there's a reason why there are so many resources around, right? Take advantage of them. And success coaching or your advisor are just a couple of all the other resources that could help you get back on track.
Yes, that's true. And I think I may be speaking for all GV staff when we say we're waiting. We're just sitting here waiting to answer
Truly.
those questions and help refer you and find those things. So maybe to wrap up, Liz, can you tell students how they might reach out to SASE if they're looking for help? I know we shared that website and where to make appointments. Are there other options too for getting connected?
Yeah, I mean, you could just simply email our general SASE email address, which is, let me just make sure I'm saying it right, SASC@gvsu.edu. You can just simply say, hey, I want to meet with a coach. Or like I said, you could go to our website and that'll get you to Navigate, which is our online platform where you can make an appointment with us. You can make an appointment with Anna. You could also make tutoring appointments. So Navigate's really the platform that you would be making that appointment in, but we're more than happy to help set you up if you just simply want to send an email as well, or you could give our office a call. And that number is 616-331-3588. So yeah, please come chat with us. We're friendly, we're excited, we're super eager to help you be successful.
Well, wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing all of those tips with us, Liz. They were great, wonderful, proactive, mindset changing topics. Yes, connect with Liz or any of our other success coaches or me or any of our other advisors for assistance as you work through the program. We can't wait to talk to you.